recording and editing myself talking has made me really acquainted with all my weird mannerisms, which are hard not to be embarrassed by precisely because they're so repetitive. A lot of what we say is repetitious, undead, autopilot stuff. On my YouTube channel I say the same things in the same way with the same inflections pretty much all the time. So if you really wanted to embarrass me, you could create a supercut by combing through all my video, finding all the times I repeat myself, and then assembling it into a big video collage. This could be done at various granularities, focusing on anything from little ticks and repetitive word selections all the way up to style and structure of narrative units and so on. Mockable speech patterns are just the beginning in a situation like this, since if I were a very possessed sort of person, I could also imply vastly more damaging things about my targets, say in an attempt to maliciously expose someone's religious or political beliefs, sexual orientations, or etc. In fact, this sort of thing could be performed on any collection of human speech, probably with similarly embarrassing results in all cases, but currently it's only performed on content with enough visibility to justify the effort. Right now I'm not vulnerable to this because very few people are watching and it would require a lot of labor to make one of these cuts. Someone would have to be very invested in me to perform the labor of watching hours and hours of content, identifying all these speech patterns and finally cutting the material back together. But machine intelligence will soon make these sorts of operations trivial. Many powerful techniques will be combined and packaged into nice little weaponized scripts, orientable towards any YouTube channel or similar collection of data, which will produce just these sorts of cuts instantly, according to quite arbitrary user-specified params. Cuts demonstrating things like implicit racism or sexism, or statements indicative of common personality disorders like narcissism and sociopathy, will probably exist as preset selections. By interacting with something like a paranoia control, users will be able to tune the machine's output according to their taste, with results ranging from reasonable inference to complete slander. Imagining a little how such a thing could develop, we might expect that once machine-enhanced cuts are easy to produce, there will be a huge wave of deployment, probably with quite chaotic initial results. Following this we might expect a slow settling pattern in which the machine cuts lose some of their impact, as people come to understand that they not only reveal truth, but also create it, and perhaps most importantly, actively disguise it through rhetorical techniques that establish an air of confidence or skepticism as required by the agenda of the machine's master. On one level I guess I'm making an obvious observation about rarity and how it affects perceived value, as well as echoing some common intuitions about how media tools reliably increase our baseline media sophistication, but there's a specific aspect of this I want to highlight, which is that in this example the impact is primarily psychological. It's only possible to mock others for traits we imagine we don't possess ourselves. People are generally very talented when it comes to repressing all their own embarrassing characteristics and projecting them onto other people. In our example, what gets repressed while watching a Nicolas Cage supercut is precisely all the ways in which his exaggerated gyrations and facial expressions are directly relatable to our own experience. I suppose this tracks the difference between laughing in empathy and laughing in mean-spiritedness. The difference is in identification. Anyway, if someone assembles a terrible big data crunch on a less visible person right now, we don't exactly know not to trust it yet, 'cause we haven't learned that it could be like making fun of someone for having bodily functions, i.e. it can only work by pretending something universal is individual and then blaming the individual. Although we are all subject to the same set of behavioral laws, we often insist on remaining ignorant to the degree to which human behavior is completely looped up in these very repetitive machinic modes of operation. It's an unpopular point because it amounts to a reduction in the importance of the ego as modeled by the ego. But perhaps the machines will also reveal to us that the aspects of human experience we consider to be the most shameful and secret are in fact, simultaneously, the most common and boring. Another new factor is that people are now streaming their speech into online archives with amazing fidelity. I think this means they're providing the data today that the machines of tomorrow will eat for patterns. Although today we might rush to judgment, tomorrow we might learn that these operations can be applied to anybody with similar results. This will let a lot of the smoke out of the building. However, we will probably also learn that the tech can be used in both active and passive ways, and that how we navigate that polarity is going to involve very subtle statistical questions with very powerful implications. By this I mean that it's possible to aim a neural net at some data and tell it to amplify very weak regularities, or even, beyond this threshold, to project predetermined content into arbitrary sets of data, like Google's dog hallucinating deep dream algorithms. In our example, this would be like using machine labor to paint someone in a certain light by taking a very small number of statements out of context, or simply making up statements altogether and falsely attributing them to the target. However, it will also be possible to use these tools to make accurate observations about reasonably objective structures in data, like Bauman et al.'s recent development of a system that can accurately estimate the stiffness and area weight of fabrics using raw video as input. The upper limit on this sort of radically effective pattern amplification and inference isn't known yet, but it's already enough to make me feel very strange. Let's imagine that a given subject really does exhibit a persistent bias in their speech about some topic, which can be shown to exist to a, let's say, statistically significant degree by the weird algo eyeballs. It's not immediately obvious what a situation like this would imply about the person who rendered the speech, since the existence of a bad distribution on the output doesn't necessarily reveal any information about the psychological factors that produced it, except when thinking in gestalts, which excludes the particularities of the individual by definition. One effect of this is that as people play and suffer with the new tools, toys, weapons, the whole problem of statistical thinking and its relation to the world and all the tricky epistemological issues that plague philosophy and science will become a very unusual set of practical concerns for everyday people. The machines and their masters will soon perform a variety of tasks, some evil, some good, some undefined, some imaginary, some real. I think the machines will do this across many domains, unearthing embarrassing consistencies in human behavior and its products. It's hard to say what we'll make of these regularities in the end. My assumption is that we'll have to confront each one on its own terms, in its own way. But what's certain is that we'll soon be positively drowning in them. My concern is primarily with whatever strong regularities remain after the comparative flood has run its course. When the sea of informational noise has settled back into low tide, what weird objects will it have left on the shore? A very bizarre aspect of all this is that the machines are likely to remix our perception, not just in terms of the data mock-ups they produce, but in terms of how they produce them. The machines are models of human beings, of course, like all things humans make. Here they model some particular aspects of pattern detection, and also maybe parts of meaning-making, like analogical reasoning. As with any particular model or collection of models, they reveal and conceal reality simultaneously, but in ways that are quite particular to the model and its object in each case. To use a dumb sort of philosophy example, modeling a burger in terms of a salad maps differently than modeling it in terms of a sandwich, such that the salad-like characteristics of the burger are, at least initially, emphasized over its sandwich-like characteristics. Our new machines will therefore reflect firstly the aspects of us that are already machine-like. Many strange factors emerge here, as this is likely to produce positive feedback loops wherein our tendency to model ourselves in a certain way can actually develop latent potentialities in the personality, causing us to resemble the model as much as the model already resembles us. Furthermore, the degree to which human beings have agency in this collision is of course a very open question, as there are weird autonomous dynamics governing both technology and human evolution. BTW, although I don't mean to reduce the human to the machine or vice versa, I also don't mean to completely isolate them. My belief is that technology actually tracks the unconscious more closely than consciousness and is therefore quite radically other. Yet also, since the unconscious is still an aspect of the human, it's in fact quite radically familiar. Yet also, since the unconscious is a natural system, it unifies not only the human and the technological but also the technological and the natural. You see where it goes with the unconscious, it's always strange interlocking unities and disunities. But I'm very certain that people will resist learning about the ways in which they are already like machines. I'm not sure what the response will be to these new tools and problems socially, but I can't seem to shake the feeling of collective shadow confrontation looming on the immediate horizon. Back to our example again, automated supercuts of various qualities and agendas will become cheap and therefore acquire the ring and sting of ad hominem attacks. I think people are smart and will learn to adopt a skeptical attitude towards them very quickly. However, it just kicks us back to the same problem in a way, because we still have the difficult task of figuring out whether a particular mechanically enhanced statement is true or false, relative to some particular standard in some particular context. This is actually the problem we already have today with non-mechanically enhanced statements. We never really get to escape from the problem of interpretation. Taking this problem seriously would involve looking very closely, not just at the output of the machine, but at what's going on at its various levels of pattern detection and amplification. Note that this is a slightly different issue from the conventional black box problem surrounding neural nets, which indicates that we can't know precisely how they arrive at solutions. That's true, but we should be able to see a correspondence map, i.e., a representation of what the machine determined matched with what, at each level of its analytic hierarchy. Ideally, this should include graphs of distributions and other relevant facts. Something sort of like this is being worked on by an AI researcher named Chris Olah. He calls it an activation atlas, and I'm sure there are other similar examples. However, there's also a complexity outrun problem there, since the cutting-edge neural nets, delivering the most powerful results, may be the most difficult to probe, perhaps as an inevitable outcome of innate dynamics in the tech. But if these systems don't end up possessing such a level of transparency or something close to it, I can really see the timeline turning very dark. However, I also wonder if this wouldn't result in more shadow integration more quickly, therefore also more intensely and with a potentially more healing result. But also I am afraid, a potentially more catastrophic result. However, I also never underestimate the human capacity to repress even the most immediately obvious facts if they are wounding enough to the ego's self-image. It is in fact secondary only to that human capacity to invent the most ridiculous lies to avoid the same inevitable outcome, the development of a realistic self-image. As per usual, more questions than answers, but I had a good time composing this in collaboration with the weird robot voice that someone decided to build into my computer. Thank you for listening.